In later years, Ron surmised that if he'd been hired by Montgomery Ward, he may never have left Illinois. A deep, serious thinker, Reagan often wondered at how people's lives are shaped by what seem like small and inconsequential events, how an apparently random turn in the road can lead you a long way from where you ever expected to go. For the future president, the first of these turns occurred in the summer of 1932, right in the heart of the Depression. He recalled those as cheerless, desperate days, and he felt that anyone who didn't live through the Depression could never understand how bad it was. He remembered President Franklin D. Roosevelt saying the country was dying by inches. There were millions of people out of work. The unemployment rate across the country was over 26%. Every day, the radio warned people not to leave home to find work because there were simply no jobs anywhere. And there were no jobs, and for many it seemed like there was no hope. In Dixon, a town of nearly 10,000 people in northwestern Illinois where the Reagans lived, many farm families had lost their land to crushing debt. The local cement plant that had provided many of the jobs closed. On downtown streets there were perpetual clusters of men huddled outside boarded-up shops. Ron had been lucky. In the summer of 1932, he was working his 7th year as a lifeguard at Lowell Park, and he saved enough money to finance a job-hunting trip to Chicago. He had a new college diploma and a lot of dreams. He kept his job-hunting trip a secret from his father, who sincerely believed those radio warnings and would surely have discouraged his son from leaving. But off Ron went, hitchhiking to Chicago with visions of getting a job as a radio announcer. But all he got was rejection. No one wanted an inexperienced kid, especially during the Depression. So he hitchhiked back to Dixon with his dreams all but smothered by this harsh introduction to reality. When he got home, his father told him that Montgomery Ward was going to open a store right in Dixon, and they were looking for someone who'd been active in sports at Dixon High to manage the sporting goods department. The job would pay $12.50 a week. Suddenly, Ron had a new dream. It wasn't as glamorous as his real dream of working in radio, but to Ron it seemed more realistic, particularly considering the Depression. He wanted nothing more than to work at that store. He'd lettered in football in both high school and college and loved just about every other sport. He told his father he'd run the best sporting goods department Montgomery Ward had ever seen. And when he applied for the job, he told the manager the same thing. However, a few days later, Ron was heartbroken. Ward's gave the job to a former superstar on the high school basketball team. After that crushing blow, Ron told his father about his unsuccessful job-hunting trip in Chicago and mentioned that a woman at the NBC station there had suggested that he look for a job in what she called the sticks to get some experience before trying to crack the big time in Chicago. Ron considered that some of the best advice he ever got. He crossed the river into Iowa, where his first stop was station WOC in Davenport. He took the elevator to the top floor and asked to see the program director. Pete MacArthur listened while Ron gave his pitch about being willing to take any job just to get a start in radio. MacArthur then said, "Where were you yesterday?"
They had just hired an announcer the day before I got there. Where was I? Why didn't I know about this? I didn't tell him. I didn't listen to his station. But on the way out, he said, "You start broadcasting an imaginary football game." Well, I remembered a game that we had won in the last 20 seconds with a 65-yard touchdown. In the game, I missed my block, but our man made the touchdown. I replayed that fourth quarter for him, and in the replay, I nailed that fellow with a block he couldn't make.
MacArthur was very impressed with young Reagan's audition and told him to report on Saturday to broadcast the Iowa-Minnesota homecoming game. The pay would be $5 and bus fare. The following week, MacArthur told Reagan he'd passed the test and hired him to broadcast Iowa's 3 remaining regular season games, for which he'd receive $10 each. Not only could Reagan now call himself a sports announcer, He'd gotten a 100% raise in only 1 week. Then came another big break. When he'd been in Davenport less than 3 months, MacArthur asked him if he knew anything about track. Ron told him he ran the quarter mile and had been on a championship relay team. MacArthur told him of station WHO, their sister station, who needed someone to broadcast the Drake Relays, one of the top track meets in the country. Ron got the assignment, and a few weeks later, the Palmer Company, owners of WHO, received FCC clearance for a 50,000-watt clear channel station in Des Moines. WOC was closing, and the entire staff went to WHO. It was a big step for Ron. There were only 15 50,000-watt clear channel stations in the country at that time, and to work at one was the biggest thing in radio. Overnight, WHO became one of the most powerful NBC stations in the country. His success broadcasting the Drake Relays earned Ron the position of sports announcer. Those 4 years at WHO were among Ron's most pleasant in his life. At a mere 22 years old, he'd achieved his dream of being a sports announcer.